Thank you for checking out The Luttrell Show, building businesses, bars, and brands. Today, I'm joined by the boss of a company that brought us the Bacon and Beer Classic, Taco Takeover, and Wild West Adventures, Seltzerland. If you haven't heard of these events, they are massive events. They host tens of thousands of people, and they are incredibly fun. They're fun, they're silly, and everybody has a real, a hardcore blast of them. And one of the things that is most interesting to me about them is that they are literally in sports stadiums. I actually got to work one of them one time in Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. So without further delay, please welcome the head of Cannonball Productions, Kate Levenstien. Welcome to the show, Kate Levenstien.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show. It's companies like yours are big heroes of mine. I was saying before, it's kind of what I hoped my company would become after I'd spent a lifetime building it. But you are the CEO and owner of Cannonball Productions, which produces monster events like Bacon and Beer, Spritz Fest, and that's just your concepts. And then you also build and then you also produce client concepts as well. So tell us about your business.
Yeah, so first, I guess it's been 7 years. So we've been producing food and beverage festivals around the country. The Bacon and Beer Classic is held in major markets in massive stadiums, and we bring in all the most amazing restaurants and breweries, and it's an all-you-can-eat, all-you-can-drink food and beverage. So games and activities and contests and partnerships, and we bring Hormel in, so they bring in Black Label bacon, and they have 7 different flavors of bacon, and so people really just get to have it as their ultimate cheat day, and they walk around with a mini solo cup that's a glass solo cup that they keep for forever, that come in multiple colors now, so it's a beast.
I actually worked that event last year on behalf of a client.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So I was working for one of your vendors at Bacon and Beer at the U.S. Open Arthur Ashe Stadium, and it was an experience. All right. Everybody kind of had this same unified vision of what that day was going to be about, and it was hilarious. And everybody they just had a good time. And I can't remember the last time I saw that many people just having a good time. And everybody had this one thing in common. It was an obsession with just like you said, the ultimate cheat day. My favorite memory of Bacon and Beer, though, was when anytime somebody would break one of their little ceramic cups they were given, the entire perimeter around them would crowd shame them for breaking their glass. And as vendors, we were supposed to be putting their drinks in those glasses, but we always had backups to make sure we cheated a little bit too. But
I'll tell you a funny story about that really, really quickly, because you're making these are warming my heart, these stories. So we, the first event we ever did for Bacon and Beer was at Safeco Field where the Mariners play in Seattle. And we had the glass cups and people were breaking them. And we learned a lot, as most event producers do. They learn a lot from their first event and from their first 10 events. But we learned a lot that first event. And they were bigger cups. And the breweries were filling them up. And we ran through beer really fast. And people were getting, really drunk. And so the amount of cups that were getting thrown on purpose was excessive. And so then we thought, okay, for the second event, we have to get plastic cups or hard plastic cups that are still, high quality, but that won't shatter. And it was actually my mom who was at the first event who said, I actually think we need to keep the glass because it has this community building effect of people coming together and chanting when a glass breaks. We just need to make them smaller. So it was kind of a funny thing. And I actually find myself cheering with the people, the shaming. I love it. We all carry as
no doubt. I mean, if you can just picture, it's a 6 ounce, 4, 5, 6 ounce, ceramic solo cup. It looks like a solo cup, and it's branded and it's beautiful. And it's not something you want to break. But when it happens, people are just but I cannot imagine the cup being any bigger than that because, there is limitless bacon and limitless beer.
And hundreds of breweries and, styles. And we took over that whole facility where the U.S. Open is in Queens. And that was actually, I think we were one of the first festivals to ever be there without it being a tennis organization, a tennis match or some kind. So it was pretty cool to take over that space because that space is beautiful.
I mean, where does the concept of something like bacon and beer come from? I mean, it's like kind of a gimme that everybody loves beer, everybody definitely loves bacon, but how were you able to create a concept on that scale and convince people to let you have their sacred stadiums? I mean, stadiums specifically are very sacred to people, and they're like iconic and landmark elements of people's cities, and they like to think that they are, very personal to them.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of responsibility to take over that space. Yeah.
Yeah. And expensive. I was working for another company called LivingSocial, which was like a Groupon structured company, but they had an event division. And so I was running their live event team in the Midwest, and we were we decided to host bacon and beer dinners. And it was one of the concepts when one market hosted something like that, and then we would try it out on the West Coast, or we would try it on the East Coast. Not everything resonated with everyone, but the bacon and beer dinners across the board were widely received. So then beer festivals started to become more popular in like 2010, 2011. By 2012, we were hosting our own beer festivals. And we threw an epic festival at the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. It was amazing. We had 10,000 people in one session. First event that had ever happened there like that. And I felt like, it was incredible, but I felt like the culinary, I love food. I live to eat. And I felt like the food aspect was not highlighted. It was just like a couple of food trucks that were there and they could sell food and the lines were long, and it just didn't feel like they were connecting. And so I thought, why not bring in a food like bacon that goes with everything? Like anything that you put bacon in, it makes it better. So whether it's ice cream or salads or tacos and Chinese food, like anything. And it was super diverse. So it allowed chefs to get creative and highlight whatever food they wanted to highlight, whether, as I mentioned, like different ethnicity, ethnic background foods, or sweets or savories, whatever it may be. So it was a really crazy idea. But when LivingSocial shut its doors, they had already greenlit this idea, which was, I put together a competitive analysis and a P&L, and there was not that much like it. Nobody was doing it on a national level. And so I said, this is it, we're doing it. And talked to my parents, and they were retired at the time. And so they said, I think you should do it. And you can see what the outcome might be. I was also 26 and I was super naive, and which was to my benefit because I was just fearless. I had nothing to lose at that point. And I called up stadiums. I just started calling stadiums. And
you were cold calling stadiums?
Cold calling stadiums. Yeah. In fact, we had done one festival through LivingSocial. I'd arranged, it was a glow in the dark 5K at Soldier Field. And it was a 15,000 person event with a couple of other companies. It was our LivingSocial's event, but we were working on with different production companies. And they were my first phone call. I already had this relationship built with Soldier Field. And she said, our contact there at the time said, honestly, Kate, I think you're in over your head. I love what you're doing, but call us in a couple of years. And I said, I know what I'm doing. I want to do this. We're going to host it at Soldier Field, sooner than later. And we did. We hosted it, I think, the following year. So, but we, I think the biggest piece of advice I was given at a really early stage was to make it seem like you knew what you were doing. If you felt like a cat and you acted like a cat, they were going to perceive you as a cat. If you felt like a cat, but you were perceived as a lion, then they would see you as a lion. And I think that was very early on one piece of advice I was given. So I just made it seem like I knew what I was doing when I was calling these stadiums. And a couple of them said yes. And those were the ones we went to.
Okay. So we're still going. If you wouldn't mind, so you were cold calling stadiums.
Yeah, I was cold calling stadiums. We probably called every Major League Baseball stadium in the country. And a couple said yes. And those are the ones we went forward with. So that was Citi Field in New York and Safeco Field in Seattle. So Seattle was our first event. And we still work with the same people and decision makers at Seattle to this day. And New York was crazy. It was big. We ended up taking over 2 days and sessions. And just
I don't even want to think about what the deposit is like in a place like that.
Yeah.
I mean, these seem like pretty, I was going to say, these seem like pretty capital intensive ventures. I mean, did you take out a loan from a bank, or what do you do on when you're rolling the dice like that?
Yeah, honestly, they were really both both venues were really understanding and gave us very, very, they like structured the payouts so that we would have some upfront costs and deposit, but that the bulk of the fee was due closer to the event day. So it was really nice that they structured it that way for us, that we were able to have the event. So
God, talk about fearless. My God.
I know. I look now and I'm like, what was I thinking? So crazy, but
that's so crazy. Cause I mean, like with on that scale, you got to think about security. Like the insurance must've been outrageous. Even like, I mean, you have to get cancellation insurance in case it rains, right?
No cancellation insurance. Not a thing.
Here.
Not a thing. No, not a thing. I mean, cancellation insurance it exists, but it's so expensive. And that's something that, like, to bring it back to what's happening today, it's nearly impossible for small events to be able to afford, or even, I don't know who has cancellation insurance. I know that Wimbledon has it because they were able, I think they've been paying $2 million a year for 16 years. So they've paid $32 million, but when they canceled this year, they were able to, recoup the $140 million that they would have lost otherwise. It's a really expensive thing to
I guess I'd heard that the Googa Mooga had cancellation insurance, and maybe that's why there's no Googa Mooga anymore.
Maybe. Yeah, I bet Googa Mooga did have cancellation insurance, being that it was part of Superfly. So I bet Superfly has cancellation insurance. We just didn't. And I think luckily, like, our stadiums, we haven't ever had to cancel anything before COVID-19, and our stadiums are mostly like covered indoor, outdoor. They lended themselves pretty nicely to, like, be weather resistant in some capacities. And the thing I love about the stadiums is that it's a one-stop shop. So yes, it's expensive, but they have bathrooms. So, like, one of the worst things about going to an event is waiting in, like, porta potty lines. Well, at a stadium, you don't ever have to do that. There's very quick entry access, and it's always secure because they have the machines that you walk through, and you don't have to have metal in your pocket. They they have all the guards and the hosts and the security and police, and everything is there. So we knew that from a safety and security standpoint, we would be in a good place. We knew from, like, the actual space that we could expand into, we would be set. So it was expensive, but we also knew that with that came credibility. And I think at that point, I didn't want to just be another event company. We wanted to be the food and beverage event company. And so we really wanted to make the ticket accessible, because a lot of the food and beverage events that were on sale at that time were either the really high end, like New York City Wine and Food or Aspen Wine and Food, that I could never afford, even though I would have loved to attend. Or it was like the free carnival style where you would buy a ticket, or like the smorgasbord style where you would just go for free and you could go and taste, but it wasn't a tasting sampling event. You would just buy, like, a sandwich, and the food is awesome, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a walk around, try everything, eat and drink, all inclusive event.
No sumo wrestling.
Sumo wrestling. What'd you say? we have some inflatable sumo costumes at our events, but we did. But that, I think, was why we ended up at stadiums, and we wanted that credibility. We wanted the nice cups. We had a mobile app. Like, we wanted everything to just scream credibility.
Well, you mentioned COVID-19, and what does a massive stadium event production company do in a world where people can't get together in the same way anymore?
I think
obviously you've thought about it. I mean, like, has anything materialized as far as, like, what your vision is for your company?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of scenarios and options right now. So separately, I've set up a coalition of other ticketed event producers and just event producers in general, so that we can be having weekly conversations and hear from some experts. So that's been really inspiring. And it's been fun to, get friends and friends of friends in the industry together to kind of chat through all different scenarios and what everyone else is doing. So that's one thing that I've been doing separately from Cannonball. Within Cannonball, I think we see ourselves as having a couple of different options. So one is, yes, events will be back. It will be a while, or it might be a while that they're back in the same way that they were, pre-March of this year. So I think, we're excited that people are eventually going to be wanting to come out and attending events like this. I think we need to be really mindful of the fact that it won't be this year necessarily in the capacity that it had been. But that's not to say that we can't get creative and think of some ways that we can socially distance and have some gatherings of some sort potentially this year, but definitely next. And we're being in New York, I think especially we have felt the emotional and personal impact that COVID has had on our community. Like personally, my, grandparents had it. My grandmother has survived and she didn't have symptoms, and my grandfather passed from it. And, that puts things in perspective when you're thinking about your company. Yes, it's it's an extension of myself and my family, but I think, we're not going to be doing something that puts people at risk. And so we've been thinking a lot about procedures and policies. We've been talking to a lot of decision makers and people who are leading those decision makers to make certain, to create rules and regulations around what will be able to take place. I wouldn't want to put anybody in a position where we as a company wouldn't want to put people in a position where they would be, more likely to spread the virus or to, get the virus. Yeah. But that being said, I think that there are some really interesting things happening. Virtual is happening. I think that there are some pros and cons to it. A really interesting speaker I heard was describing new mediums, and it was fascinating to hear him speak because he said that, when television first came out, they would take the old medium, which was radio, and just spin it to be on, now you're using a different medium, but using the old format of radio. But now you're just sitting there with your notepad reading the news like you would as if you were on radio. And then you had the web, and you would take print magazines and newspapers and just regurgitate what would have been on print pages, but now you're just spitting it onto the web. And now look how far we've come in both television and, online capabilities. And so I think if we take virtual and we're like, well, we can deliver food and we can deliver beer to their homes, and now we have a beer and food fest, I think we're in that stage right now, which is totally fine. And I think it's really incredible how quickly companies have moved to even get to that point of being able to deliver beer and food and have an at-home food and beer festival. But it does feel like that model of like, okay, well, we're just trying to regurgitate what we had been doing and now doing it through a new medium. However, I do think virtual is really interesting for a lot of reasons. One, I think it will be a marketing tool that we can implement even when live events are back. And I think people are more accustomed to it. They're, more comfortable with it. They have it downloaded on their computers. And so why wouldn't we be able to sell in a partner or chefs and highlight chefs and breweries to do a pre-event cooking demo or a new beer can release that's digital to share with our community. So I think that there are ways that we can integrate virtual into our repertoire as we move forward. I don't necessarily know if it's virtual or bust for a lot of event companies. Right now it's just similar and something that we can use. Yeah. And then lastly, I guess I would say,
well, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear about your grandfather.
Thank you.
That's awful.
Yeah, I think, you can read about it, and then he was fine. He was totally fine the last time I saw him, which was just 2 months ago. And he's walking around like the mayor. So I think that was really hard. And what people are having a hard time understanding, I think, is that yes, it's older people who are being more, severely impacted. But when you go through it and you're just thinking of your family member dying alone, nobody deserves to be in that position. And nobody deserves to put a nurse in the position of, those nurses are now family to us. We call them and we send them packages, and they took care of our family like they were, one of us. So I think it was added a whole nother level. And at that same time, I was going through, we had 9 events on sale at the beginning of March. And so we've had to pivot just from those and postpone or just hold on new dates. Some we have new dates for, but most are just postponed until we can figure out what those new dates are, especially because we're relying on the stadiums to provide us with the schedules.
That was another thing I was going to ask you about is like, how do you, you like batch produce events around the country. So you'll do bacon and beer in 9 different markets back to back to back to back to back. And so that puts your team on the road for what? A couple weeks, a month?
Yeah, at least. We were supposed to have 9 events from mid-April. So starting actually April 4th through June 15th, we had 9 events planned. We had a couple events on the same weekend. So May 9th, I think we were supposed to have 2 events. We've done 3 events on the same weekend. That was in different markets, and they were all major festivals. So, and we had just launched Seltzerland, which is our newest festival, a hard seltzer festival.
Seltzerland, that's right.
Yeah.
I think I call it Spritzland or Spritz.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Spritzfest, whatever. That's okay. I knew what you meant. So it's a hard seltzer festival, and it was on sale, and we had great partners on board, and it was something our team was just so excited about. And we are excited. It's going to happen. It's, at some point I have to stop talking about it. Like it's, gone to the grave, but it's going to be great. And we had, I think, 10 of those events slated for 2020. So it's just like wrapping those up, dealing with refunds and providing credits to our attendees to use for future events. And then, and something we're thinking about, even if we can't have these live events that I was mentioning, is like maybe we could do, smaller dinners in person, but socially distanced, or other, like drive-in style events. You were in your car and,
Yeah, you were talking about virtual and augmented reality stuff. That sounds really interesting to me. I had a ton of ideas of when you said that. I was like, why not? Like, why can't you have bacon and beer? Like when you're looking around with your Oculus and you look around and say there's Pilsner Urquell over there, or there's Slow and Low over there, and then then a package just materializes at your doorstep that's got a bunch of bacon and a bunch of beer in it.
Yeah, it would be super cool. I mean, I think especially if you could have a couple of people around you, or there's so much technology that is coming out of this that we can put people in rooms together, or you can select which room you want to go into, and you can be in there with your buddies who are also attending, or you can be in there with a whole different group of people that you don't even know, so that you're meeting people. And I think that could like really foster some cool interactions and, community networking that you might not even get as much as you get, virtually. So.
Yeah, like you said, necessity is the mother of invention. I'm sure we're going to figure something out. Well, can you tell? I'm just still trying to understand. I never in a million years thought I would be talking to the person who produced bacon and beer.
Oh my gosh!
But I remember like being inside of it and wondering like, how the fuck do you reverse engineer something this massive? And like, it's
really good team.
Yeah, and your head count is around 10.
Small. Like, we're super lean. Yeah, I would say about 10.
About 10. And so you guys come in and then you'll produce an event in different markets. And you were talking about over a period of about 2 months is the bulk of your busy for your concepts. And that's not even including the client business. And then
I would say even more than that. So I would say it's about 4 months. So 2 months it's usually 2 months in this. For bacon and beer, it's mostly in the spring. But then Seltzerland was going to be like all year long. We're going to do about 2 a month for 5 months, and maybe even more. Like that's something that we could scale pretty easily. So if we wanted to do it in 20 markets next year, we could. And then we have a taco and tequila festival too. So it's a lot. It's pretty much all year long.
You do the north in the winter, or the north in the summer, and then the south in the winter. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. To reverse engineer it, a really good team, really strong relationships. I think it just comes down to keeping in mind that like our venues and our vendors are really essential. Like we can't do what we do without them. And so this time, it's as hard as it's been for us. We've been trying to support our vendors as much as we can. So moving forward, a portion of the proceeds back directly to them. We usually work with local nonprofits, but we want the money that we want some of the money that we can give them this year from ticket sales to go directly to our food vendors and our brewers. And it's a hard time for everyone right now, but we want to try and just promote them as much as we can through our social outlets and just let people know of anything that new and cool that they're doing, whether it be curbside pickup or dinners once those start happening. I think those strong relationships are crucial. And then just getting to be a little creative and think about like, what would you want? What's the most ridiculous thing that you could imagine? And what can we, we have a giant bacon seesaw, which came out last year, that you can like ride. And it took a GIF and, or GIF, whatever, and send it to yourself. So we just try and think of ridiculous things as much as we can. We have these giant letters that you can climb on and take pictures of. So I think it's like those, those Instagram moments and capturing them, but also thinking of like just what memories will make the day epic and resonate for years in your mind. And our merchandise is pretty sweet. That's another thing. Our merch is really awesome.
Yes,
we have bibs for babies, and like we have big guys that come up and try and like wear them around their neck for the day. So it's the most ridiculous things.
That's so fun.
What makes it fun and memorable.
Speaking of fun and memorable, I'm a workflow and process nerd. How do you communicate with your team about what needs to be done? What kind of do you guys use like software for that, or?
So we had tried Slack. We do have Slack, but we actually, so much of what we do lives in Google, that like everything we have lives in Google. We use Asana, which is a project management tool.
Yeah.
So we kind of were like late to the game on Slack. We had already set everything up in 2013, 2014, 2015 in Google. And then we'd been using Asana, and it felt like too much to switch everything over to Slack. So we just have honestly still been using Google and Asana. And Asana is a project management tool. So you can set deadlines, you can communicate with each other through platform, you can upload documents, it has a lot of like Slack properties, but it was just something that my team was already really comfortable using. And it felt, I didn't have enough of a reason to switch it over to Slack. But we do use Zoom. We had been using Zoom. So that was, that's convenient for a lot of our phone calls. And then we have some CRM programs like Pipedrive is something we use. And we used to use Zoho for all of our restaurant and brewery databases. But Pipedrive is a great program that I highly recommend for really simple like management, and it's really affordable. And I just have loved it from a partnership. We keep track of our partners in Pipedrive.
Oh, Pipedrive, yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
It also embeds with the G Suite.
It does,
which is good.
What do you use?
I don't need a CRM. I mean, I have a pretty low headcount for clients. It's like, cause I basically exchange my time for money. So so there's only so many clients I can have for that. But I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and it's just like, the world of the independent hospitality consultant, and even to some degree, smaller event producers is going to be a very challenging world. So I've been, thinking about what the next iteration of my business is. And I've been in business for myself since 2010. And like, we're kind of thinking about media and content. And I had this podcast before all this, but it's just an interesting thing. It's just, you're just always thinking about what is next. And
wow.
Maybe, and I just really love the idea that my idea is, or my business revolves around hatching ideas all the time. And that's what I love about the story arc with Bacon and Beer, and how it went from an idea for an old company, and then it turned into this thing where you're feeding 10,000 people in a stadium. That has never had any events in like that before ever. I just make it a point to make sure that I'm just hatching up ideas like that all the time. Like I got a couple ideas to pitch you.
You go for it. I don't have tons of time right
now. Well, maybe we'll do that. I'll make an appointment. But yeah, it's like really, it's like the idea and the action behind ideas is the real currency here. And I just really appreciate what Cannonball's built over the last however long. How long has it been?
It's been 7 years.
7 years, yeah.
And I will say one other thing. I mean, like, just because we're going back to like that time, I didn't leave LivingSocial. LivingSocial had closed its live event doors. So I just gotten the green light for Bacon and Beer. I was super excited to get moving on it. We just thrown those big 3 festivals, we were doing sumo and sushi, which is funny what you said sumo. So it was a sumo, sushi, and sake festival. And then that beer festival at the Lincoln Park Zoo, and then the 5K at Soldier Field. So we had done those in a month, and then had gotten the green light on the Bacon and Beer Classic, or it wasn't called that at the time, but a Bacon and Beer Fest, and was ready to run with it. And then LivingSocial said, everyone's, done. It was the last day. I think it was I remember the day. I think it was June 15th or something. maybe earlier. And yeah, it was right around that, June 21st or something. And it was gut-wrenching. And we didn't know what to do with ourselves. And I was depressed. I was like, that was my life. That was what I loved. Those were the people I loved work with. And it was just all ripped out from underneath you or me at the time. And so I've been talking to my team, about this, and especially our interns who are graduating. I graduated in December 2008. Very, not similar to now, but, the height of the Great Recession.
Yeah, ouch.
And I was let go out of my dream job, which I know a lot of people are experiencing right now. And had I not been let go, I would never have left. I never would have started Cannonball. And so given that I had no other choice, and I was like, I didn't want to take another full-time job. I wanted to move to New York, and I wanted to, potentially start my own thing. It gave me that opportunity that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So as much as this sucks for everyone right now, just start thinking about what you can do and what you can build and what you can contribute. Because I think it's a scary time for everyone, but also such an amazing opportunity to go after something like a little side hustle that you've always, had, or a hobby that you can maybe monetize. So that's just my feeling on it is, I never expected to still be doing this 7 years down the road, but I'm really fortunate.
Yeah. And if you've ever been to any of your festivals, I'm sure that the attendees were glad you did too. So with that, if anybody out there has any sort of food-centric virtual reality, alliterative titled event that they would love to pitch to Cannonball Productions, how would we find you?
I'm around. LinkedIn is a great way. I'm on there all the time. It's my favorite social media platform. And also, I don't know, you can email us, hello@Cannonball Productions. I'm checking the customer service line regularly. I like to know what our attendees are thinking and feeling. And I've had a lot of really great calls over the last few weeks with them directly. So they've been wonderful and willing to jump on with me and tell me what they're going through and what they want from us at this time. So yeah, so send us an email at hello@cannonballproductions.com and I'll get back to you.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for your time. The head of Cannonball Productions, Kate Levenstien.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
So I think my favorite part about Kate's story is that she was in a career transition at 26 years old and had a big idea and gathered up her resources and just made it happen. We could all take a lesson from that. It takes risk to get the reward, and she took a risk and it paid off, and she was able to produce these in non-traditional venues. And if you get a chance to go to Bacon and Beer, it's a blast. I hope that's sooner than later. I really hope you enjoyed this episode talking with Kate Levenstien from Cannonball Productions. Be sure to check out the show notes for a brief summary of the show and links to the stuff that we talked about. A special thanks to Danny Messina for editing and post-producing the show. If you like the show, you may enjoy another project we started called The Industry Distilled. We go live on Facebook every Thursday, and there's a podcast coming out of that pretty soon. We read the news so you don't have to. Head to industrydistilled.com for updates, or check us out live on Facebook every Thursday. I like to keep these shows short and dense. If you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas, please be sure to reach out to me at Jason Luttrell on Twitter and Instagram, or search for Jason Luttrell on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you got anything out of our time together, you can thank me by simply sharing this with another person. If you love the show, please hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a rating, review, or comment on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. I hope everybody's staying safe out there, and we'll see you next time on The Luttrell Show.